Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yoda Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, we are back after our brief stint as a Bears YouTuber. Hope everybody enjoyed the April Fool's joke to about the 50 or 70 of you guys that unsubscribed. I hope you come back. But of course, we are Chargers YouTuber through and through. Of course, we got another Chargers related video to talk about today as the draft approaches a little bit closer, but we're like 3 weeks away now, a little bit over 3 weeks. Things are getting hot, things are getting exciting, and I think at this point we've got a lot of ideas of what we're looking for, right? I kind of want to start narrowing down what the Chargers need, not just right away, but for going into the future. So in terms of who the Chargers could be landing, let's say at 21 or even in the second round, what position might be the most impactful for the Chargers in 2023? But I think there's a lot of foresight that you could exercise with this team and in this draft in particular in helping this team in 2024 and beyond. Of course, you got the Justin Herbert contract coming up. You got the money situation that you're going to try to figure out. You're trying to get as many rookies in the building as possible to help in that effort. A lot of things to consider. So before we do get started on that, guys, we're going to go through the Chargers' biggest draft needs. We're pretty much going to grade every single position on this roster to kind of identify what we're looking for. Before we get into that, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I've been enjoying NBA. A lot of people enjoy March Madness. If you guys want to join in on the action, use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Get in on the best fantasy platform on the web, in your humble director's opinion. Good times there. Before we jump into this video, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this. Lights, camera, action. Your Chargers' biggest draft needs of the 2023 season. We're going to be pretty much grading every single position group here to kind of help us identify which positions I think that we should be focusing on in this season, trying to weigh out the advantage of grabbing a guy that really impacts this season versus future seasons, a little bit this season as well. So I'll give you guys my top 3 positions at the end of the video, but until then, I'll also be giving you guys grades on each position. Like, of course, I think we see an A+ right in front of our eyes, right? So you guys can kind of come to the conclusion of what position you think the Chargers should try and focus on. Maybe they're going for, best player available, but if they are going for a position of need, we can kind of help ourselves figure out what that could be, especially in the first round. First round, there's going to be some options. I think it's a very top-heavy draft, and I do think there's a lot of guys that you're going to find in the first couple of rounds that are going to make, or could and should make big impacts in their first season. So here we go, guys. Quarterback. We'll start off on the roster with probably the face of the franchise at this point. The Chargers got a couple of those guys, right? Derwin James, Joey Bosa on defense. On offense, got Keenan and Austin Eckler that can also help out. I think Justin Herbert, though, by far and away the most valuable player on this team right now. Of course, quarterback is definitely not a bad position to boast that fact with. Again, this is one of those easy ones. A+++ across the board. The Chargers looking fantastic at the quarterback position. They recently just re-signed Easton Stick as well, which does beg the question, do the Chargers maybe want to draft another quarterback in the 2023 season? I would vote no. I would like to, not use that draft capital in that way. But more importantly, I don't want to be using another roster spot throughout the season. The Chargers have kind of been known for that these past couple of years in rostering 3 quarterbacks throughout the entire year. I don't think they've once had to exercise the third quarterback. But either way, Chargers quarterback position looking absolutely fantastic. No worries here. Chargers got one of the best in the entire of the NFL. And you really can't ask for more at that point. Now, of course, the one thing I will mention as we move on into the next position is the Justin Herbert contract situation. Of course, a lot of people know that he is very much so due for an extension going into his 4th season. Chargers are going to have to pay him the big bucks, and that could affect how the Chargers draft, how the Chargers, sign players in free agency. Because those years of the cheap Justin Herbert being able to, sign pretty much whoever you want in free agency, that's just about over. you're going to find yourself a couple of seasons, maybe in the first 2 years of Justin Herbert's next monster contract, that are probably a little bit lenient on the cap. But at some point, you're going to start paying this man about $50 million a season, which, in my opinion, absolutely worth it. 10 years down the road, we're going to be like, wow, what a steal. We're hoping it's a 10-year deal. But just keep in mind, Justin Herbert's contract, it's coming up, and maybe that does pay some respect in terms of what decisions are made to try and fit that budget going forward. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the running back position, which does have some question marks around it, okay? And this is where we're going to talk a little bit about what the Chargers can do in the draft to address this, no matter what happens, pretty much. Austin Eckler, who requested a trade some, 3 weeks ago at this point, is the Chargers running back 1. And if there was no question marks around Austin Eckler and him being on the roster this season, I would say that this position is a solid A, right? You could add some guys to help in terms of running between the tackles, trying that physical yards, the 1-2 yard punches to maybe add and complement to an Austin Eckler to climb that to an A+. But I don't know if even I, as a Chargers fan, understand the significance and the importance of an Austin Eckler in this offense. It really runs through him in terms of scoring. This guy scored about, 40 touchdowns the last couple of seasons. Very valuable asset to this team. And of course, when I heard the news that he might want out, that he wants a bump in pay, I both sympathize for him as well as started panicking a little bit, right? Because I don't want Austin Eckler to leave, but I sympathize in terms of the running back position does get shafted quite a bit in the NFL. They're not going to get paid. And what blows is that a player that scored 40 touchdowns can't get paid, almost as much as some of these backup tackles you're finding in the league. That's absolutely ludicrous to me. But quite honestly, some of the numbers we've been hearing for Austin Eckler that he wants to be paid, somewhere in the $12 million range, I just don't see the Chargers bending to that number anytime soon. Hopefully they can find a compromise. Hopefully Austin Eckler's looked at the running back market and said, you know what, I have to give it another year. But I do feel for the man because I do want him to get paid. And you know what? A couple of $1 million more for the Chargers just to kind of help him, keep happy this upcoming season. I think that would be enough for it to be worth it to just have him stick around one more season. Now, there's also the scenario where Austin Eckler does stick around, but he only sticks around this 1 year because the Chargers don't like playing running backs. Very few teams in the NFL like playing running backs. The Chargers could, in theory, be looking to draft for the future at the halfback position. So this is why the halfback position is interesting, because you could draft for the now as well as the future, depending on how the situation is shaking out behind closed doors. The Chargers know more about this than we do. I'm sure they want to keep Austin. I'm sure Austin wants to stay with the Chargers. But if they know something behind closed doors that maybe Austin Eckler's not a Charger this season, you could see the running back position shoot way up. The Chargers would obviously be in huge contention for Bijan Robinson. There's other guys like Jahmyr Gibbs that would be honestly a good, not replacement, but it keeps that flow in terms of throwing to your running back still available for Justin Herbert. Very fast, too. And then there's guys in the second and third round that I think wouldn't be a bad idea as well if Austin Eckler's making his departure. Now, if behind closed doors they say, hey, we know Austin's going to be here this year, but it's kind of unlikely he's here next season, you can still draft for that. You could still draft Bijan Robinson. You could still draft Jahmyr Gibbs. You could still draft Charbonnet. Depending on what you're looking for, the Chargers have options this season because this season, in terms of running backs, it looks pretty good. It's kind of a freakish class. I like it a lot. Of course, led by Bijan, who's one of the more generation talents you're going to find in the NFL draft this season. But the running back position looks good, is all I'm trying to say. And all of a sudden, the Chargers have a situation at running back. So I'm going to give this this position group a grade, again, of an A. Without Austin Eckler, it's more of a C, maybe a C+, depending on how Joshua Kelly carries himself this season. Of course, he looked really good last year, but he's no Austin Eckler. If the Chargers go out and draft a guy like Bijan Robinson, then we're talking about A status yet again. Maybe A- because he's a rookie, but still. We have a situation at running back, and it's one to monitor. Okay, it's one to monitor. Next up, let's talk about the wide receivers. Led by Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. This is a solid duo in the league, guys. Very, very few teams are going to boast a duo of wide receivers as good as the Chargers currently have on the roster. Of course, they're paying a lot of money for this duo. They had to, restructure these guys. There's some ludicrous numbers coming up in 2024. For that reason, wide receiver in that conversation does need to be opened up as well. And it's kind of a crazy situation because, of course, you got Keenan Allen who's got another season after this one where he's going to be paid somewhere close to $30 million next year. I don't know, man. There's an option. I mean, I think the Chargers want to keep him around as long as possible. They could just bite, the bullet and pay that $30 million next season. But then you got a Mike Williams on the other side who's getting paid similar numbers, who's also a bit younger. If the Chargers had to choose between the two, I would think it's Mike Williams. It would be a very tough blow for the Chargers and Chargers fans to see Keenan Allen make his departure. But that cap hit is huge. And for that, the possibility of perhaps this being the last season for Keenan Allen with the Chargers, he'd be going into his 33rd year of age season next year. You got to think that there's the option of maybe cutting him and saving. It would be over $20 million worth of cap space next season. It would be a lot of money. And again, for that, I think that the conversation of wide receiver needs to be blasted wide open. Not only for the sake of maybe we need to find a way to soften the blow of losing Keenan next year, but also to add an element to the offense in 2023. You got a brand new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. He stated this team needs more speed, and if he's the offensive coordinator wanting something in terms of speed on the offense, it's going to be at wide receiver. You can get it at tight end as well, but wide receiver is really where it makes an impact, at least the most in any system. And for that, I think wide receiver is surely on the table in the first 3 rounds. I'm looking at Zay Flowers when you're talking speed. I think Quentin Johnston, the more I'm looking into this class, the more I'm loving all these wide receivers, the more I think Quentin Johnston has the most upside, the highest ceiling of all wide receivers in this class because of his physical traits, right? Very tall, very, very fast. But I wouldn't be upset about a Zay Flowers. I wouldn't be upset about Jalen Hyatt. I wouldn't be upset about a Marvin Mims or a Trey Palmer. There are guys that have speed in this draft throughout the first 2-3 rounds, even further, that could affect this roster in terms of adding speed right now. But my question for you Chargers fans is, do you feel comfortable with the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounder if you know that Keenan Allen is not going to be here next season? If you're the Chargers and you know Keenan Allen's not going to be here next season, I think you take the plunge and you grab a guy that you think is going to be a big impact piece going forward. I think you grab a guy like Zay Flowers. You could even consider a guy like Jordan Addison. I know a lot of us have been, not really talking about him lately, but Jordan Addison's not slow. He's not the fastest guy, but he's not slow. But man, is he a good route runner. And that's a great way to supplement, or at least try and supplement, the lack of a Keenan Allen all of a sudden on a roster. If you're the Chargers and you know Keenan's not going to be here next season, I think Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, these guys are certainly on the table at pick 21. So right now I'm going to give the Chargers, again, at this position group, it's an A. It could be an A+ if they had that speed on the roster too, but this is a great combo right now. But I think if you're drafting for this position to not only make an impact this season with that speed, but maybe future-proof it a little bit with the Keenan situation next year, it certainly does change things a little bit. It certainly does change things. So wide receiver, that's a very, very serious option for the Chargers, even at 21. But I think it's a little more serious in the 2nd and 3rd round. If they end up going a different position in the 1st round, I think it's going to happen within the first 3 rounds. Just because they need that speed anyway. It just depends on what they think they're going to do with Keenan Allen next season. All right, next up, let's talk about the tight end. Not much to say here, man. I love Gerald Everett, and I think Gerald Everett did the exact Gerald Everett thing that we needed him to do this season, and that was be a better Jared Cook. That's what the Chargers needed. And I think Gerald Everett has a bright future in this league as a journeyman tight end. Does that kind of make sense? He's the kind of guy that's going to come in, he's going to do what he does, and it's good. He put up good numbers this season. He did what the Chargers asked him to do. He went in there and he added the element to the offense that Justin Herbert needed. That being said, he was only signed to a 2-year deal, and this could be his last season with the Chargers, right? If he goes out there and puts up similar numbers to last season, that's good news for the Chargers. That means it was a good year. But it's not that impact at tight end that you're hoping to see. And again, I say this a lot. In this day and age, tight end, it's starting to feel like it's a much more important position to championship caliber teams, right? You got the Ravens with Mark Andrews. You got the Chiefs with Travis Kelce, of course. You got these top tier tight ends that are really helping these offenses, stay consistent, I would say. Having a consistent tight end really does spell more consistencies in health and drives and then scoring. And I think, Gerald Everett, as good as he is, the Chargers, once again, could be looking for either a future player at the position or a player to step in right now. And that's also because of how, I would say, talented the tight end class is this season. Wide receiver, not so much. You're going to have to draft somebody in the first 3 rounds if you want someone that's going to contribute right away. Tight end, you could probably draft somebody in the 4th and still feel pretty good about him, especially going into the future. So right now, I will give the tight end position a grade of a B-. I think it's a fair grade. Maybe even a C+, depending on how you view Gerald Everett going into the future. But I think a B- is fair. Maybe C+ is actually a little bit more fair. We'll say C+, because of what Gerald Everett is, what he provides to the team, but more so the longevity that we're seeing with the position. I think the position of tight end is certainly on the table. The more I think about it, which is kind of crazy because I'm such a Kincaid believer, I'm such a Michael Mayer believer, I'm a first-round tight end believer, and I certainly think it still could happen. But the more I'm looking at the position and how stacked it is this season, I think the Chargers would be wise to maybe draft a tight end in the 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th round, because there's good talent there. There's talent that you can work with. There's guys with upsides, right? Like Zach Kuntz, dudes. That guy, I would be shocked if he wasn't drafted in the 2nd round. If he's available in the 3rd or the 4th, and the Chargers are able to scoop him up there, he's got massive upside, dudes. He could be, I don't even know how to explain it. A Mike Gesicki, a George Kittle, that kind of talent, I feel like it's very much so possible in the later rounds. So if the Chargers at this point, they're saying maybe we need to supplement, or maybe we need to think ahead at the running back or wide receiver position, it may be worth it to draft a tight end just a little bit later. So that's where I'm at with the tight end. I think tight end's in a good spot. It could be in a better spot. You could give Justin Herbert his elite guy by drafting a tight end in the 1st or 2nd round in a Michael Mayer or a Dalton Kincaid. But I think we might be okay drafting a guy a little bit later while also addressing maybe wide receiver or running back at the same time. All right, so I'm going to give you a tight end position a C+. Next up, let's go to the offensive line. And this is crazy, guys. As a Chargers fan, I've not had very many seasons where I felt this way about the offensive line. We look good. We look really good. I think outside of depth and backups, this is the best I've seen the Chargers offensive line in my time as a fan. Right? Corey Linsley. You got the returning Rashawn Slater, which is so massive. I can't even tell you guys. You got Jamari Sawyer, who's stepping into that guard role. Somebody just mentioned to me, I must have missed it somehow in a busy week last week, that Zion Johnson, Jamari Sawyer are going to be switching sides. You're going to see Zion on the left and Sawyer on the right, kind of their native positions in college. They're both elite, right? Not elite, but definitely above average, right? Well above average. And you got the right tackle in Trey Pipkins, who I would say is just about average. Probably the weakest link on the line, but still average is definitely not bad for the weakest link. Everybody else looks fantastic. So the offensive line, one of those positions where outside of depth, I think it's got to be an A. And it's the first time I can ever think of the Chargers offensive line being an A. It could be an A+ if the right tackle position was maybe an A-tier player. I would say Trey Pipkins is more of a B- player, which is totally fair. So I would say, yeah, an A- for the offensive line position. You could still see some players drafted in the later rounds to address the depth behind our starters. Definitely that could still happen. But outside of that, I'm feeling really good about the offensive line. All right, dudes, let's get into the defense, right? And this one, I don't know how much we're going to see in terms of drafting in the defensive side of the ball this season, just because of how much the Chargers have invested in terms of cap space and trades and et cetera, in free agency the last couple of seasons on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, you can never have enough talent on defense. Of course, we have a head coach who's defensive-minded, right? You could still, and I do fully believe we're going to see some investment on the defensive side of the ball, but I would hope the Chargers go mostly offense this season just to try and help balance things out. Either way, let's go over these position groups and see if we were to draft a position, which would be most likely, right? Which position are we looking at most likely? Starting with the defensive line. Now, the defensive line, I'll just give you guys the grade first, okay? I'm going to give you guys a grade of the defensive line. I think a C is pretty fair, kind of depending on what you're talking about. Run defense, I think, is a C. I think pass rush from the interior defensive line is more of a C+, and that's more because of this guy, Morgan Fox. Man, did we get a steal with this dude last season in free agency, and I think we got a steal with this dude in his extension this year. Insanity. The kind of money that we were able to sign him for. Chargers got a screaming deal. And he's what I would say the most effective player in the interior. I'm so happy. He's what we were hoping Jerry Tillery would be, right? He looks good. There could be a guy opposite that could help out maybe just a little bit more. But I do think the run defense is why this position group isn't as high as others we've seen in this video so far. Run defense certainly needs some help. I think that's more scheme dependent, honestly. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking that the Brandon Staley slash Vigio or Fangio, Vic Fangio system does allow more on the ground in terms of running backs. But at the same time, I think the Chargers could be better there. If they had a caliber player like, I don't know, Javon Hargrave in the middle there, maybe you could still get away with that. But the Chargers don't have that right now. So I would say defensive line. You could argue maybe an early investment in the first round, depending on who's available. But I just don't see it in this draft class. I think this draft class, not as impressive on defensive line, in early talent at least. I think you can find maybe some guys you can take a shot on in the second, third, and fourth round, but it's not the deepest class, nor is it the most impressive class in terms of defensive line. It's certainly a need for the Chargers. It was one that I was hoping to see more in terms of a free agency, maybe even just for depth a little bit. But that's what I would expect out of the draft. If the Chargers do go in on defensive line, I would expect it to be maybe some depth guys. We do have Tito. We let go of Fayoko. Maybe a guy or two in there to really help shore up the backups. So I think the Chargers defensive line, it kind of is what it is right now. You could maybe get lucky and get a difference maker in the first round, but outside of that, I'm not quite sure if you'll be able to accomplish that. Next up, let's talk about the edge position. Now, again, this is one that definitely warrants some conversation. The Chargers' edge position right now is among the best in the entire NFL if these guys can stay on the field at the same time, right? Of course, we saw what could happen if we had one of these guys last season. We had Khalil Mack play a full year while Joey Bosa sat out most of it. And that was a bit heartbreaking because a lot of us were hoping to see that duo just wreak havoc together for the entirety of the year. What are the chances they're able to go back and do that in 2023? I think they're decently high. I think it's a decently good chance that we see Mack and Bosa play a majority of the season together in 2023. But you always got to think about what if, right? What if it happens again? What if the Bosa injury is more serious than we thought? Khalil Mack, he's had that one season where it was definitely an issue. You just got to be prepared for anything, right? So drafting an edge, not a bad idea on that precipice. But outside of that, there are so many things to consider in terms of taking an edge in this class. Okay, so right now I'll tell you guys the edge position group for the Chargers is an A+. Not many teams are going to be boasting guys like Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa coming off the edge on the same team. But for the future, now this is very similar to what we saw with the Keenan Allen contract, right? It is very heavy in 2024. And in the case of Khalil Mack, it does make sense, maybe even the most out of all of the players next season, to cut in terms of saving cap, which kind of blows because we all love Khalil Mack. We want to see him on the team as long as possible. But at that age, at that position, I think there's at least a 50-50 shot that the Chargers, maybe even more on the side, that they cut him next season. And now you throw into the mix that the edge class this season is bonkers. Right? The NFL draft is full. It's very top heavy in terms of elite talent that you could find in the first round. Now, most drafts, you're going to see edge players drafted in the first 5, picks, and then they're all gone. This season, I think you can really get a difference maker all the way through the end of the first round. All the way through, I think, Will McDonald, BJ Ojulari, who some people were drafting in the second round. Those guys you would find in the first round, really early in the first round of most drafts. That's how good this class is. Now, if the Chargers have an option like Nolan Smith staring him in the face at 21, I think Will McDonald's not a bad pick either. Van Ness is certainly not a bad option either. If the Chargers have an option like that at 21, I really think you need to consider it for 2 reasons. One, they could be a difference maker this season in terms of a rotating edge. Right? He would be the Kyle Van Noy of the season, which Van Noy turned out to be the hero last season because of Joey Bosa going down, right? And that's also, your backup dude. If we draft a rookie, you got a guy that's going to rotate in. He's still going to provide high-level pass rush, right? As well as provide that insurance in case one of these guys goes down. The Chargers still have that lethal duo on the field. And then the final cherry on top, the Chargers, if they need to part ways with Khalil Mack next season, they'll still have a guy opposite Joey Bosa to keep that pass rush very, very lethal. So for those reasons, edge has got to be very, very high in a lot of people's draft boards in terms of, would you take a Will McDonald over a guy like Zay Flowers? Would you take a Will McDonald over a guy like let's say Michael Mayer, right? One of those tight ends. I think the Chargers would consider it because of not only what the edge position could do for you this season, but I think even more importantly for next season. Edge has got to be up there. All right, next up, let's talk about the linebackers. Now, you guys see brand new linebacker Eric Kendricks on the photo right now, and that's because I think Eric Kendricks is our best linebacker on the roster right now. 31, 32 years old. He's old, guys. He's older. And that does kind of tell you how the Chargers view the position as a whole. They did not want to pay Drew Tranquil, which really blows. Considering where Trank ended up, for the money he signed for, it's really confusing. Same scenario as Kaiser White last season. Would have loved to see. Imagine, guys, if we had both those guys still on the roster, how crazy that would be. How cheap it would have ended up being. I don't know, man. I don't know if I agree with that in terms of linebacker, but it is what it is. And this is the situation we have. Of course, Eric Kendricks had nothing to do with those decisions. We are lucky to have him on this team because he is one of those guys that's really producing in the late years of his career. All right. He's not going to be prime Eric Kendricks, who's definitely known for his coverage ability. Very good versus the run as well. I think overall very good linebacker, but he's going to do the job for the Chargers. That being said, the position group, I'm going to give a grade of a C- just because of the age of the position, because of the question marks around a Kenneth Murray, because of the huge uncertainty you're going to have going into 2024. I think this draft class isn't necessarily too impressive in terms of linebacker, and especially inside linebacker. There's a couple of guys that do stand out, but the Chargers are looking for something very specific. They're looking for a guy that can cover, I think, more often than not. I think they tried the path of getting just a really physical specimen in Kenneth Murray and trying to convert him into a coverage linebacker. That didn't really work out. I think the Chargers really need to aim for a guy that really is known for that trait. And for that, I think a Dorian Williams is really where you're looking at. I think an Ivan Pace is really where you're looking at. And those are guys you can find in the third round and beyond, right? So I think edge, or I think an inside linebacker is a position you should be targeting if you're the Chargers. And I do think you can find guys with those traits in the later rounds, and they can try and compete for playing time. At this point, competing with Kenneth Murray in terms of who's the better coverage guy out there, there's a shot for a rookie to take that, even coming out of the third or fourth round. No knock on Kenneth Murray, but I just don't know if the Chargers are using him to his strengths because of how much they ask their linebackers to cover. Eric Kendricks, he should be fine. He's on the team for 2 seasons. If the Chargers go out there and get a linebacker to kind of learn underneath him, I think it would be a wise move this season. All right. Finally, we're going to get to the DBs and the special teams, and this won't take too long. DB, I think, is a sneaky need on this team. I really do. From the corner position and the safety position, I think both of these are a very, very sneaky need. Now, we'll start with the corners, right? I just want you guys to envision the names in the top 3 for the Chargers on the roster right now. I think it would go in this order: Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, J.C. Jackson. Until further notice, we don't know what's going on with J.C. Jackson in terms of his health or in terms of still transitioning into this system. We just don't know. We're hoping for the best. We've seen some good stuff on social media in his recovery. We're hoping he comes back. But there's a question mark right there. Then there's Michael Davis, who I think is in line for an extension. We don't know if that's going to happen. There's another question mark. Then there's Asante Samuel Jr., obviously the best corner of this on this roster right now. Can he do it all? Yes, he can, but at the same time, I think, again, that just adds more to the fact that I don't think the Chargers are set at corner. I think that there could be more done to help this position group out, not just for this season, but again, more specifically for the future, especially if you're not super comfortable in the J.C. Jackson situation. If you're looking at the J.C. Jackson situation and the Chargers behind closed doors say, hey, man, it's not looking good, we may not have him back until 2024, then I think you really need to go draft a corner. And that opens up a little flexibility of what you can do with Michael Davis, right? If Michael Davis goes out there and has another fantastic year and you've already drafted a corner, then maybe you start exercising the thought of cutting J.C. Jackson, right? Or trading him or whatever you got to do. If J.C. Jackson does play and he looks good and you already drafted a corner, then maybe you don't extend Michael Davis next season, right? There's a couple of different alleyways you can take in drafting a corner. So I'll tell you guys right now, my grade on the position group, if everybody's healthy, it's still like a B+. A lot depends on J.C. Jackson. If he's good, if he's average, then it's like an A-. If he's really good, then it's like an A. but I don't think that position's as secure as a lot of us are thinking. And for that, who's to say the Chargers don't take a Joey Porter, a Deonte Banks, right? Who's to say they don't go in the second or third round? I think more than likely second, third round, fourth round even. You can find some guys to go in there and just kind of help supplement that issue just a little bit, just massage it. But who's to say? Brandon Staley, we know the way that he views corners. Who's to say that he doesn't want to go in deep on that position? I think it's a huge possibility. Huge possibility. Safety, again, another very sneaky need for this team, and it's really because of that free safety position. The Nasir Adderley. Nasir Adderley's gone, and he's actually retired, which is super crazy. And the Chargers really don't have anything on that side other than the rookie from last season, JT Woods, who doesn't look like he's ready to step into that spot quite yet. On the strong safety position, we got Derwin James and Alohi Gilman, both of which, of course, Derwin, like the best in the league, and then Alohi's looking really nice lately. That alone is like an A-, right? But I think the huge hole that we have at free safety pulls that grade down to like, I should say, the strong safety is an A+. The issue at free safety pulls it down to like an A-, maybe a B+, because of how important that position is to the system. Not having a guy there right now, it hurts you. It definitely hurts you. Now, I think if I was a betting man, and if literally I was putting money down on this, I would say that the Chargers don't go into the draft with free safety as a need. John Johnson III is out there. Huge connections to Brandon Staley and the system. Big fit. Still a producer. I think John Johnson's going to be a Charger, if I'm being honest with you guys. I think John Johnson's coming. And if that's the case, if John Johnson's on this roster, the safety position's an A+. I think mostly boosted from Derwin James, but John Johnson's a heck of a player too, right? And then that kind of shortens your list of what you need in the draft. If the Chargers do go into the draft with this need, I would say that Brian Branch would be a big steal if he slips to us at 21. You got Robinson that you can grab in the second, third round. You got J.L. Skinner you can grab later in the middle rounds. I think there's options you can grab at safety. It's not a bad safety class, but I would expect the Chargers to try and address that before the draft. I think it's just the most intelligent thing you can do. I don't think John Johnson's going to cost a lot of money. He's a perfect scheme fit, and he's got connections to the coaching staff. Okay. Finally, special teams. I'm going to give this a solid B+, B. I think B. I think B is fair because we don't know who's going to be our returner at this point. I think the Chargers need to find a guy with speed, but I like who we have at punter. I like who we have at kicker quite a bit. We got Dicker the kicker, who was fantastic last season. J.K. Scott is sneakily maybe the best punter in the NFL. I really think that. We just the big question mark is the return guy, our return guy. And I think the Chargers are aware of that. They've been doing a good job the last couple of seasons finding guys to come in and play that role. DeAndre Carter was pretty dang good. And then Roberts was not bad the season before that. So I think we'll be okay. Ever since we got the new hire at special teams coach, things have been looking a little bit better on special teams for the Chargers the past couple of seasons. So, all right, to wrap up this video, again, I think the Chargers are in a good spot for 2023. I don't think we have the biggest needs in the world. I think some of the things that you can do this season in the draft are more important for 2024 and beyond. Some of these positions can affect this year as well as next year. So to give you guys my rank as to what I think the top 3 needs the Chargers should be drafting for in 2023 are going to be, and you guys let me know what your top 3 are in the comment section below. I think at number 3, the Chargers should be targeting a tight end. I think that honestly, in terms of wide receiver, you can find some guys a little bit later. I think even tight end, you can find a little bit later again, because this is my number 3. I think, again, if you're looking between the position of, let's say, like offensive line or defensive line or whatever in the second or third round, and you got a good tight end there, that's where this would come in, right? Where I'm like, take that tight end, man. You need somebody to kind of step in for Gerald Everett in the future, as well as a guy that maybe in this tight end heavy class would be a steal that you can develop with a Justin Herbert. So I would say tight end's my number 3. At number 2 is wide receiver. The Keenan Allen situation is pretty serious in my opinion, as well as the Chargers needing speed. Again, this is not the best class, especially top heavy class for wide receiver, but I think it's one worth investing in. And this is one where I would say a first rounder is in the cards for me. I think wide receiver, once again, like it's been back and forth between, running back, I really want Bijan, to wide receiver, to tight end. Like I've been really bouncing around a lot of names. I think my preferred guy would be Bijan Robinson, no matter what's going on with Austin Eckler. But I think in terms of what we need right now, wide receiver kind of feels like a pretty big one. So I'm going to put them at number 2. And then at number 1, we're going to go with edge. I think edge is the most intelligent pick that you can make in this draft class if somebody is still available that you like a lot. I'm talking Nolan Smith, Will McDonald, Van Ness. There are names that should be in our range at 21 that would never be there in future seasons. And given the situation of the Chargers edge position group, the Khalil Mack situation, the money situation, a situation in which maybe one of these guys isn't 100% healthy, we'll need a rotational guy this season. I think edge could end up being the most important position group for the Chargers to focus on. So you guys in the comment section below, let me know your top 3 position groups. Again, I'm going with tight end, wide receiver, edge. It's crazy. It's crazy the options the Chargers have this season, but I think it's even more crazy, looking at the situation we've created for ourselves going forward and how that can dictate our decision-making this season. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the director of the Chargers football organization. Not officially, but I'm a Chargers YouTuber, not a Bears YouTuber. It's been a good one, guys. Appreciate all your time in here. If you like this, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. You're not passing on Nolan Smith. That's definitely a conclusion I've come to if he makes it to 21.